Right, so hi everyone and welcome to Architecture in the Den. And today I'm delighted to welcome Simon Ricketts. So Simon's a planning lawyer who I met on Clubhouse. Went on Clubhouse sort of in the middle of lockdown, I think it was in January. And we've been speaking, I think, virtually every week.
Yes.
And it's been really good to kind of get to know you and enjoy conversations and how our paths cross. So I'm delighted to invite you and welcome you onto our podcast.
Well, thank you, Lisa. Delighted, flattered, and it's really good to see you as well as hear you.
I've just muted myself because I've got a bit of a cold, so if you hear me go quiet, it's because I'm having a little coughing fit. Anyway, so just why does anyone need a planning lawyer?
Well, that's a good question to start with. If everything worked well and the world was perfect, no one would need any lawyers. If the development system worked perfectly, then we probably wouldn't need quite as many planning lawyers as there are at the moment. I suppose the things that drive the need for a planning lawyer on a project are, first of all, complexity. The bigger it is, the more complex the issues that arise, the more likely it is that it's going to be helpful to have a bit of sort of guidance, first of all, on procedural issues, perhaps with some rigor as to what the rules actually are about validity or notices or determination timescales or the structure of the application or anything like that, or to help with the substantive arguments. How do you argue that this proposal meets a particular policy test? What precedents can you draw on? So one thing is complexity. The other thing is more prosaic, which is a sort of transactional need if there's an agreement needed. So if you've got a Section 106 agreement that is required in order for permission to be issued, then reach for your planning lawyer. And thirdly, there's the Rumpole of the Bailey moment, which is, when things get contentious, whether that's going to a planning appeal or judicial review in the courts. So all of that sends people our way, I suppose.
So for me, dealing with kind of extensions, we tend, our first point of call would be a planning consultant.
Yes.
So I guess, do you take instruction from planning consultants?
Planning consultants are probably our best friends after architects, in that, no, actually most of our work does come by way of referrals from planning consultants, and we sort of work symbiotically. There is no clear dividing line between what we do and what a planning consultant does, but yeah, and on those smaller projects that you mentioned, Lisa, I suppose where we come into play is, first of all, when things get a bit contentious, because sometimes those neighbourly issues can be more tricky than anything on domestic schemes. Secondly, things like community infrastructure levy, increasingly difficult. For example, the self-build exemption and things like that. We usually work as a team with planning consultant, architect, and other specialist consultants. So
do you get involved in like party wall issues?
To an extent. We know our limitations in that, first of all, I'd always really point to getting a good party wall surveyor involved first off, and then if things get contentious in relation to party wall issues, it can be more of an issue for a property litigation lawyer, because it's either about boundaries or nuisance or trespass and all these issues which are a bit outside of our domain. Because I always think of planning law, really, it's the interaction between, it's an area of public law, i.e. when you're dealing with the powers and constraints on the way that the state and emanations of the state, like local authorities, can behave. So it's really, if you're involving the public sector, we're involved. If it's a private law matter between two neighbours, that's not so much something for us.
So we took a bit of a break. I had an emergency call, so we'll get back to the conversation. So we were starting to talk about rights of light and the difference between daylight and, what is it, rights to daylight and rights to light?
Yeah, well, effect on daylight and sunlight is an issue for the planning, for planning decisions. So applying local authorities' policies about the maximum amount of impact that there can be on adjoining properties, usually based on the BRE guidance, which is a sort of separate thing from formal rights of light, which are easements or implied easements that adjoining property owners have, if they've got windows that have enjoyed light for at least 20 years, and if your development is going to reduce the amount of light below a certain amount. First thing to say is, obviously, this is a hugely technical area where obviously we all reach for rights of light surveyors, but secondly, you may need to reach for a planning lawyer if we're talking about daylight and sunlight issues in the planning context. And there have been various cases where planning permissions have been challenged and quashed by the courts, where the local authority has relied on assessment work on daylight and sunlight, which turns out to be inaccurate or over-optimistic. So we do need to be careful about all of that. Or you may need to reach for a property litigation lawyer if you're dealing with formal rights to light, where an adjoining owner may have the right to go for an injunction in the court or to seek compensation. Yeah, bit minefield.
So what sort of projects do you get involved with?
I focus on, I've always acted mainly for the private sector, mainly on large, complex, controversial schemes. I suppose, with a split of about half of my work in London and half of the work all across England. And what I really love is projects where we can really make a difference, perhaps large sustainable urban extensions, or new garden villages, new towns, or big mixed-use schemes within urban areas. So, and along the way, what I also love is quirky work, things which are unusual. So I acted on the agreements that were needed with Lambeth Council and various other public bodies in order to retain permanently the London Eye, because people forget that when, at the time of the millennium, when David Marks had his amazing project for the London Eye, it originally only had a temporary permission for a few years because no one knew if it was going to be a success. Everyone thought it was appalling that there was this great big light-hearted structure at the centre of historic London, next to County Hall, over the river from the Houses of Parliament, and so it only had a temporary permission. So it was a long negotiation to get the Eye on a more permanent footing. So a long, long time ago now, but that was one I was very proud of, and see it every day on the local news when you see the silhouette, because now the London Eye is part of the London skyline. Secondly, probably only a stone's throw away from that, but to show that I'm not always just acting for the money, although I do like to act for the money. I acted for the skateboarders who there's an area on the South Bank, which you probably know, Lisa. In fact, I think we've talked about it before.
We had a conversation about this.
I
think in the brief respite to lockdown, I took my 12-year-old son to London, and sort of purposefully, when I was thinking of the routes and the kind of like the tourist areas to go and take him to, it was the London Eye and the Undercroft of the South Bank where the skateboarders park was. For me, from Manchester, that's, walking along the Thames with the skateboarders is a important tourist centre for me.
Yeah, exactly. It's a brilliant part of London, and this really it was a really fascinating set of issues, because the South Bank Centre was looking to refurbish and extend their complex, which included Queen Elizabeth Hall and the Undercroft beneath Queen Elizabeth Hall has been colonised by skateboarders, and everyone knows it. It's been used for decades, and yeah, it's a bit grungy, but it's an essential part of the mix that makes up London. And this is all about, it's really interesting to me, how you arrive at really interesting city environments, and you can't plan everything to death. Some things just happen. So skateboarders traditionally use this area, and when it was and the refurbishment scheme entailed proposing shops in this area and kicking out the skateboarders, but unfortunately for the South Bank Centre, skateboarders have dads and mums who sometimes know lawyers. So I got involved, and we came up with some crazy ideas. We got it designated as an asset of community value, and then we applied for town or village green status for the skateboarding area, because it meets the tests for being a village green, crazily enough. And that took us.
What are the tests for being a village?
That it has to have an area which has been used by a local community for so as of right, to sort of further local recreation, and I can't remember it, but there's a test which is all around.
I've got the song going around in my head. The Kinks, what is it? Village Green Preservation Society.
Yeah. No, definitely.
If I had music rights or anything like that, I'd stick it on in the background.
Yeah, we could have Waterloo Sunset as well. It could be. Yes. It could be just put the whole album on. Yeah. So we had some litigation around that, and it resulted in a settlement that kept the skateboarders at the South Bank, and everyone's apparently lived happily together ever after. So that was good. But most of my work is big schemes, as I say. So there's a large regeneration project in Hampshire, Fawley Waterside, which is the redevelopment of the former Fawley Power Station, where there's going to be sort of 1,000 or so homes, plus a marina and commercial development. And so all of that, really, together with whoever rings up next with a crazy question.
Well, you never know who listens to this podcast. We were just talking about this before. The podcast, it's on YouTube and it's on Spotify, and it's just going to stay in the ether forever. You've got your own podcast, haven't you?
Yeah. Well, I've got a blog called Simonicity, where every Saturday morning I sit down and try and write a bit about whatever's happening about planning and the intersection between planning and law and politics, really, which is really interesting at the moment, in particular, because you've got the will they or won't they in terms of reforming the planning system. You've got climate change, the beauty agenda. So yeah, I don't I leave podcasts to you, Lisa. You do them much better than me.
And we both run separate clubs and rooms on Clubhouse as well. So mine's Constructive Together, which is times changing at the moment. I think our next one is Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. And then I'm going to try it for 1 o'clock on a Monday afternoon, I think, after that. So I'm just trying to find the right slots for it. What time's yours?
It's a 6 o'clock on Tuesday evenings, but it is really difficult to find times. But I think you'll agree, number one, it kept us all sane and doing things and networking during lockdown. And number two, it's just been a fantastic way of, well, I think we're an example of that, of people who wouldn't otherwise have sort of connected to get to know each other in a way that's different from just on like LinkedIn or Twitter or something like that.
Well, I think it's been brilliant. We can start. I mean, we met sort of 9 months ago online, and there's a group of us, like Ming and Jason Doyle, and kind of all starting to sort of work together in various ways. It's just an example of how networking works.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always interested by your business, Lisa, and how you expand your network, and presumably like us, you're dependent on referrals, and it's not just existing clients who speak to other clients, but it's people who are sort of who become aware of what you do and what you're well known for. That's presumably one of the main reasons that you invest so much time in Clubhouse and the podcasts, etc.
Well, yeah, I think when you're in business and you're trying to create leads and clients and work and cash flow, sometimes you never quite know what's going to work. I think being an entrepreneur is about trying. So I've got 2 dogs in the background, and I've no idea what they've got, but they've probably got a coat of mine or something. Like, as well as my dad being ill, I've got their dog. They had a new puppy, and they were like, there you go. So we've now got a puppy as well as our dog. I dread to think what's going on. Sorry. So we were talking about business and why we do these things. I think it's always good to be an early adopter of social media. I was not first on Twitter, but an early adopter of Twitter early on. And when I first set up my company, Rains Architecture, 10 years ago, and it was just a really great way of kind of meeting. People were much easier to connect to social media back then. And I think that's it. I think once you kind of, if you're an early adopter, you hop on a social media, you stick with it. And it's about persistence. And both of us know how hard it is to kind of keep on going time and time again on 8 o'clock on a Monday morning. It's consistency, persistence. And it's about developing relationships.
Yeah.
It's something that we encourage our franchisees to do as well, sort of, but it works for, sort of the franchise business itself.
Yeah, and part of what you're selling is the fact that you are what people see, it, and they can trust you, and they can see how you are in this podcast is, I suspect, how you are if you're sitting down at a desk or a table with a client.
Yes. So. Go off on one talking about dogs.
Without the dogs.
Without the dogs. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And it's all about kind of bringing the whole person to the table as well. I think we've both talked about this before. I'm sort of quite transparent about kind of affiliations and you're sort of talking about, you know, like my transgender son, and kind of getting involved in, you know, LGBT stuff. And I think and as well, it's about finding people who've got the same values.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
If someone gets annoyed because you're talking about your dog or your dad or something like that, you know, why would I actually want to work with them?
No, that's right. And I mean, and it's really interesting for us all to compare and contrast experiences, because you know, the way that I suspect we both started in larger firms, but have both sort of moved away from that, but in different ways, because, you know, I'm part of a firm that I helped set up 5 years ago, where a number of us came out of big city firms, and we decided to set up as a firm in one office in London. I'm in the office at the moment, and it's, you know, one open plan space, and I suppose about a third of us are in at the moment, but that's it. And in some ways, I suppose it's quite a formal, traditional structure of a law firm with partners and staff, etc. Whereas you, and now I know how you set up, Lisa, I'm thinking, did I miss a trick here? This franchise thing. No.
It's very happy to have a chat with you about that, but
no,
yeah,
I'm not changing things, but I think it's a really different way of,
it's a different model
way.
It's a different business model. I mean, for me, when I first set up on my own, and people are like, oh, you know, where do you want to be in 5 years' time, you know, in terms of planning my future and how I was going to grow an office. And, you know, I was thinking, oh, I need a fancy office in Manchester, and I need 8 staff, and I want to be driving this car, and, you know, I want to, you know, have these people doing this and these people doing that. And then for me, I realized that was really just the kind of patriarchal model that I had been following. You know, It's where I'd worked, it's the experience that I'd seen. Whereas actually, you know, what was going to work for me was a really lean but efficient business model. You know, so it's just, you know, just me in the business with kind of a team of kind of trusted referral partners, and, you know, subcontractors. The important thing about my business is just the system, you know, kind of like the way we've systemized everything so that it can be then multiplied. And, you know, when I set up on my own, I thought about the idea of franchising relatively early on. I just thought, you know, if I systemize things as I go through, so I'm never reinventing the wheel, then all we can do is tighten things up as we go along. And, you know, sort of 10 years later, you know, we've got we're continually kind of sharing knowledge of lessons learned and kind of what's gone well and what's not gone well. What can we learn? What can we improve? And everyone's individual experience, it's then just combined just to reinforce the system. You know, have we checked, you know, a lot of did you get on well with your neighbours? It's one of the clear questions that we ask our clients. You know, why? Well, you're likely to need a party wall agreement, and, you know, there may be issues on planning, there may be issues on access, there may be issues on party wall, and it's just everything, you know, is all combined knowledge that we then invest back into the business immediately.
Yeah, and through focusing on pretty much one type of development, you can systemize, because you pretty much know all the permutations of what can go wrong, and sort of manage them out.
Yes. Which does take me to sort of like one of the things that we did want to mention, and I'm aware that we've only got 5 minutes left. Sort of, what are your views on the proposed government reforms to the planning system?
In 5 minutes. I suppose last summer there was this, the white paper was published, and it, the Prime Minister was saying in the foreword that they were going to be tearing up the old system and replacing it with something completely new. It wasn't really so radical, but it was quite radical. And I think nearly everyone, developers included, thought that most of it was pretty unnecessary, and that what we really need to do is make sure the system is better resourced, modernized, and yes, digitized much more, and sensible changes in policy, etc. But really, we didn't need to start again. And we've had a lot of noise over the last year, and lo and behold, now Michael Gove has come in to replace Robert Jenrick, and the reforms are paused. And I suspect what we probably will get is just a little tightening of procedures here and there and changes of policy, but nothing too radical, which is sort of fine by me, because I'm a great believer in the current system, and it's frustrating at times, but ultimately, I think it is fair for everyone involved. It's fair for our clients if they're the developers. It's fair for those who want to, make representations, etc. And we'll lose a lot if we try and start again. So I don't think we're going to see radical reform, but the world is changing so quickly, and rightly we need to respond to the climate emergency and make sure that we've got a system that can deliver the huge changes that are going to be needed to get us to net zero carbon by 2050, so in terms of everything that's needed by way of renewable energy and other technologies. And a lot of this doesn't come without pain, because there will be some local residents who are next to new pieces of infrastructure which are being proposed for the greater good, and they'll be objecting, and it's going to be an interesting time for all of us involved in development as we adapt our thinking to reflect all these new ways of doing things.
I suspect you've written some blogs on this.
Does it sound like that? Yes.
I think now's the time to kind of bring the conversation to a close and let you promote your blog again. So how do we find?
Well, if people are interested, it's Simonicity. So Simon I City, or you can join Lisa and myself on Clubhouse. And if you do that, there's the Planning Law Unplanned Club on Tuesday nights. There's more planning lawyers than you can shake a stick at. So what an exciting idea that is.
And we make it. Yes, and hope to see you. Are you going to be able to join us on
at 8 o'clock?
Tuesday? Oh, tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Yes. Are you going to be able to join? Oh, brilliant. Oh, that'll be nice. Yes.
Yeah.
Get the gang back together.
Yeah. No, that would be really good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks very much, Simon, for coming on. We'll post a link to your blog in the blurb, so if people just want to check out the description. And if you've enjoyed listening to the podcast, please subscribe, share, and likewise on YouTube, subscribe and share. And if you want to come on, please get in contact with me. You can find me on most channels, Lisa Raynes, Raynes, or you can have a look at our franchise website, which is prideroadfranchise.co.uk. So, and that's it. So I'm going to say goodbye to Simon. And,
bye, Lisa. Thank you.
And thanks for joining us.